The southern ones, they only did as much as the French did about, or the Germans and all, or even less than the Germans, I would say the French did. For Western Europe, that goes into like that. So the ones who did the least, they did the most are the British. In order, it would be the English. Let's say country by country, so it would be British. Then it would be probably Ireland, and then those Germanic I would call them ex-Holy Roman Empire countries. And then third place would be France, would be the Benelux countries, including France, which is not actually counted as a Benelux country, but never mind, I would count it in. And then finally the Latin countries, and then last place, the ones that did the least, would be the Scandinavian countries. And then it also subdivides between each of the subgroupings, so starting with the British, the English would do it most, obviously. Then going with the Irish and the ex-Holy Roman Empire countries, I guess the Irish would do it most. The Irish would do it most, but maybe almost identical to how much the Germans would do it. Germans precisely, not Austrians and all. Then third category of Western European countries, the Benelux counting the French. I guess the French would do it most. Then fourth category of Western European countries, I suppose the Italians would do it the most. And then last category, the Scandinavian countries, I reckon the Kingdom of Sweden would do it the most, because it was the closest in culture and I think also geographically speaking to Britain, simply. So then it subdivides again. In England, we establish England as the one that does the most. Britain, I said. So in Britain, which is the place which did the most? In England. As part of France, where is the place that would do it the most? The northernmost one goes to where, let one say, where the northern half. No, sorry, I forgot to count the Germany. So yeah, Irish or German, I would say Ireland would do it the most, especially the north of independent Ireland, the northeasternmost Ireland, so the closest with England would do the most. Then France, northern half of France would do the most. Then fourth category, the Latin countries, I said Italy, so the northern half of Italy would do the most. And finally, for Sweden, are the southernmost, westernmost part of Sweden would do the most, because as soon as it goes really south, but east, it starts being Eastern European. So I establish who does it the most in those places. Then for the American continent as a whole, who does it the most? United States first, obviously. And then I don't know any about the others. I guess Brazil, the others have practically nothing to survive. So if you go with the United States, northern states, or in other words, the independent states during the Civil War, the independent states, the states that voted for Abraham Lincoln, and especially the northern easternmost states would have done it the most. And also it was the most modern, had the most factories and most clothing consumption, and the highest concentration of people and upper middle classes too. So the highest percent of upper middle classes and upper class, which remains true till today, really. So that is the situation. So if you want to get original, having established as it works now, the situation of today now becomes clear as water. At least it's clear water like that. That is the reason for which most antiques found, whether it be in a superbly luxurious and expensive antique shop in the middle of Mayfair, or some cheap bazaar at the end of Czechoslovakia. Most antiques from between the years 1840s, because most things do not survive before that, to 1920s when things were not antiques anymore, just vintage. Most of antiques from that era, at least menswear, they tell you they are either American, French, German or British. And when you start thinking more about it, you start realizing that even when they are French, they are usually actually more from the northern half of France than the southern half, which have very different styles, more like the Italians. Because of everything I have explained throughout all those short videos, that I have really become an OCD and I have to stop recording and write my book. But anyhow, so it means that, so you could think, if you want to dress exactly like an art, all that was to say, so now linking it back to the original playlist, how to acquire a Victorian menswear when originals won't fit. So even if they do fit, even if your height is 165 or even shorter, so you think you have the average height back then for the whole world, even if you was super tiny at 160, okay, but you want to dress like precisely I won't even go in upper class, that would be even harder, but upper middle class or even simply middle class, precisely like a Mexican from northeasternmost Mexico. All chances are you have to get it made, as I explained it. But the way I explained it, that I know I actually can give websites only for the British manner, because that is what I'm interested about. But you will still have to, discover how things were done for the Mexican manner, how things were done and all, and loomed, and have it made. Not because you have the right height, but for the vast majority of the world, those antiques were not worn because most people would not even dress like that, and then in most places they would not even keep clothing. They would destroy it, and then wars happen and all. So they would still need to have it made, whether you are Mexican and living in Mexico, but even more if you are British living in Britain, because then you cannot even get the few Mexican antiques, because remember, you go to Mexico, realistically speaking, and you will not go long enough to be able to get antiques, and you will not even speak the language. So yeah, you would still require to have it made. If you are like me, and initially I wanted to make more playlists about dressing precisely like me, precisely upper class British, precisely 1890s, it is equally impossible because most of the upper class items, as I explained it, have not survived, as I explained it in detail in the playlist entitled Why Are Most Victorian Antiques That Survive Black. I explained it in detail there. So, to recap, even if you want the best manner, the only manner you could really have dressed like originals for the precise context you would like to do would be, if you wanted precise, it would be, first of all, if you were the right height, so ideally not above 170, because in those places they were bigger, and wanted precisely to dress like an upper middle class British man, the common conservative upper middle class British man, and even more conservative than that, maybe like a banker who always dressed formally, because then these are most of the garments, these are the highest percentage of garments you can find in comparison to the subculture category and class of all items made that have survived. That is the highest percent that have survived. I hope you have understood the whole mashed up sentence I just made. I cannot make it again. It was meant to say something precise there. But if even you are like me and you want to dress like the upper middle class, the upper class, even of Britain, then it becomes actually impossible. We cannot find these original pieces. Most of them are in museums or in upper class families, and we do not even know about them. And so you need to dress like an upper middle class. Or even, if for example the upper middle class on that occasion would have worn a bowler hat, then you can wear a top hat. But the top hat you will find will actually have been made for an upper middle class, and so an expert, a profound expert like me, can tell the difference, at least when he sees it in real life. The techniques used to make it, and sometimes even the precise styling, is not quite the same, and also with upper classes it is more unique and better made and usually involves pure